Then let's go over them and try to get some consensus on what has been done. First of all, adjective system. It's the exact same as before, except that before this was a system claim. I changed it to an adjective. The only thing that's different with before is rather than as a claim, it's now as a certain domain type. The information that was submitted to the system as a certain domain type, which is either candidate, accepted, or rejected. That's the same as before. I added some examples, stuff that is submitted as standalone claims or claims or as a fragment.
Excellent. So alignment, Felix, Tim?
Yes, I'm good. Can check for me, please.
I'll do it. That's system.
Too late. I'm personally still a bit like not happy with the name, but that's a different discussion. I'm not certain system is the best name for this, because I think system, the way Mike-Antoine was using it in yesterday's meeting, was more like anything added to the system, not necessarily implying that it needs to be needs in a whole acceptance process.
Was there something separate, like submitted still?
Submitted is candidate, essentially.
Candidate, right?
Yes.
It's, yeah, I see what you're saying, but the acceptance process might be a no-up, right? So
yeah, indeed, that's an easy way out, I guess.
It is. I'm all for easy way outs.
But it begs the question of the usefulness of this adjective, which we shortly hinted at yesterday, right? If everything that's not aspirational is system.
The usefulness is in, I mean, this is a glossary, this is a definition. The usefulness is in being able to debate these things.
Yeah. Until
we decide how, like, just because we have a word for it doesn't mean it has to exist in the system or be implemented. You can check me off for system.
Cool. I'm gonna drag this to consensus. Fragments. That's primarily. Oh, Felix, you already checked off your name. I read it and I didn't change anything because it was aspirational. I don't see problems with the current broad definition as like similar to how we have guidelines for claims.
Yeah, Felix, for the record, I had some objections that is that really aspirational? Is that, do you need an acceptance process for fragment? But I've decided to let go, and I was convinced that, yeah, there are cases where
and
the
either way, we'll get into the specifics if we continue to try to define contextual claim, because I think there might be disagreement on whether or not contextual claim should use a system, but we'll get there later. I think
we'll get there later.
Yeah,
I agree.
exactly.
So I have checked me. I have checked myself. So that leaves Tim.
I'm just looking real quick again. Right. So yeah. Wait. Yeah. The one thing I want to, I mean, I guess this is a question of a good fragment, well-formed fragment or not.
Which is relevant if we consider it similar to claim. If it's aspirational, we can include what we can see whether or not we agree on what well-formed means, which then would make sense.
I guess it's aspirational, but part of the aspiration, then the question is, can it be an open-ended fragment? This is the one that keeps coming back to me. Is we're used to linking to a place, but not defining the extent of the reference. And so I'm wondering if aspirationally a fragment should be defining the extent, or it's just enough, it's just a URL with no other details enough.
I was going to say all fragment definitions I'm familiar with, and again, mostly the W3C annotation standard. It is a range, not open-ended, but it's true that you could argue that just giving the URL and not defining a fragment. It's just defining a fragment with the totality.
Or maybe that's
Which
a
is
different
fine.
word, which is reference, which is what we use inside of Fragment. As you know, we talk about a fragment having a reference to something.
Yeah. What I'm saying, okay, the reason I'm a bit, it's true that, okay, this is not the fragment as in URL fragment, which is, you know, the part after the hash. And maybe we should be clear that this is different, that this is referring to
Maybe that's a does not match definition of a web fragment, right?
Well, the problem is it does, kind of.
Not, yeah, exactly, because a web fragment could denote
Okay.
like a subsection on a page.
It's a subsection, it does, but it's not the main intent of the definition, which is, but it does fit the definition as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But as you say, it's open-ended, so it's less usable, yada, yada, yada. Meek.
Is it identified? Because the definition is an identified spatial and temporal subset. I guess if let's consider the edge case of a web URL, is that subset identified? For me, implicitly, when you send the URL, I would consider the entire page the fragment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I would say as well.
That's common usage, actually, right? That's what people do. That's what people do. Like people send, okay, you can find it under this URL, or you find it in this book without naming a page.
Yeah.
So I would say indeed that matches the definition.
I would say that's an edge. Yeah, I would say it matched the definition, but it's still an edge case. What I would say certainly matches the definition is not an edge case, is a URL with a fragment, with a URL fragment.
That matches the definition?
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
I'm just going to add a web page.
And this one is a bit annoying because, as you say, Tim, it doesn't have an end, but it's still, it could have an end in the sense that normally it should be the DOM, like it's a DOM element, and as such, a DOM element is a tree structure, and it should be, for example, that paragraph, or that div, or that span, or that whatever, which has the ID, or the anchor.
I don't know. For me, I think it depends on what the fragment points to. So if this is the aspirational one, right? If the aspiration is to point to a something, if you go there and you locate the source and you see it's a clear paragraph, I'm like, yeah, sure, this is a fragment. But if it jumps to like a full block of text and the fragment is like halfway through, it doesn't, for me, I didn't. So it really depends on context in this case.
The context that's annoying, to be honest, is most of the fragments I've seen in practice point to a header, and then it's kind of
with
implied,
Markdown, that's a default.
Yeah, and then it kind of implies that it's the whole section of which this is the header, which does not correspond to a DOM tree structure. But you know.
But do you see my point? I don't think you can consider it without considering what the locator is pointing to in the media source.
Yes, and I agree.
So I think this example is too small. So with great example being a subsection on the web page, for example, that I would say that's clearly a fragment.
Yeah. I would say div identifier or something like that. And then maybe the H1 could be an edge case because
that's not how a fragment even works.
It's called anchor.
Yeah, exactly. It's an anchor. It's not a div identifier.
No, if you put no. If you put ID equals on a div, you can use it as a fragment identifier. The anchor is the original. Yeah, the original was anchor, anchor equals or name equals. But now anything that has ID equals on anything, it's a fragment identifier.
Oh, I didn't know.
I guess that makes sense because an ID is always unique on the page, so it can work as a fragment. Why not?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
That's a change. I think it's HTML5, but yeah, it's absolutely legal, accepted, standard.
But I mean, it doesn't again matter whether it's a div or not. I mean, the fact is it's visually a subsection.
Yeah, but no, it does, because it's to go to your point. If it's the div happens to be a H1, Like if the not the div, but the node, if the node happens to be a header node, then implicitly we know, because it's a header node, we probably want the whole thing below. As opposed to if it's a div node, we probably just want the div.
But it's the same. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, because yeah.
No, if it's pointing at the H, we don't want just the H. We could even put that in the edge cases.
Yeah, or we could say visual section or whatever, because it's usually identified by humans or retrieved by humans.
Okay, I really don't think it matters. I mean, this just goes to show that we need a more formalized, materialized fragment. But for this discussion, I think if we agree, it just points to a title on the web page, then
it matches. And even better if it points to a div. But
section identified by the title is implied, something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Can we find some more examples of that does not match the definition? Or does it not matter? I mean, yeah, a web URL without a fragment is indeed an edge case. I would say it's a full web page, but indeed.
We could add page 1 million of whatever book.
Or Google search results.
Oh, Google search results is a great one.
Is that an edge case?
No, I think not, because it's too mutable.
Yeah, but mutability we excluded. We said retrieval using the identifier may fail.
I mean, it's in general with dynamic content, right? You could link to the current weather forecast, which always changes. Something like this is probably not a good fragment.
That's part of the. We discussed this when we introduced the definition, and I think it should be clear that the intent is, for me, I wouldn't mind making this thing that what is being retrieved is immutable. Or is expected to not change.
It's changing the definition, but it's a change I would be happy with.
Here's something that's interesting about that. I think I would be in favor of it being immutable. But what's interesting is the thing you're linking to, because if you're linking to, how do I say it? If the point is that you're linking to an application, doesn't matter that it's changing. If you're saying here is Google search, right? Or if you're saying here is the current weather, and your point is you're linking to the current weather.
But you wouldn't. You wouldn't do that as a fragment. You wouldn't.
And then it's a reference.
If you consider why you're introducing fragments, you would never want to use that type of fragment in a contextual claim.
I think that's correct.
So I was thinking, what if you are referring to an application?
Yeah, that's a better example.
The thing you're trying to refer to, right?
Like a binary file. Then you could argue the binary file is immutable.
Right. It's not the output that's generating that you care about. You're trying to refer to the thing itself. But then it's a reference still. It's not really a fragment, or is it?
But it's not the spatial and temporal subset of a media source either, is it? So
yeah, in a way, there's kind of two senses of fragments, and I agree. It's a real use case. I think it's another use case. For example, taking here is today's weather in Montreal and have a reference, and it could be a fragment identifier. Here's the weather forecast page. Here's the place where they actually put the temperature, and I want to be able to refer to that temperature. But it's something else than what we're doing, I think.
It's an entity. That thing is an entity. If we're referring to an application, if we're referring to the current weather report, it's also an entity, I think that's the difference. It's not a fragment.
No, exactly. Yeah. I think we need to stick to why we're defining it, and that's indeed because we want to use it in a contextual claim. That's why we're adding this.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it makes perfect sense. It's immutable. I don't remember why we didn't add that, but.
Because it's not always immutable.
Yeah, I think it's.
You can't guarantee, but it's aspirational. Maybe that's why we didn't add it.
Exactly. I was going to say exactly that. It should be intended to be immutable. though
Okay.
that may fail.
So actually, because we turned aspirational, we can now improve the definition, and then that means that the system fragment doesn't necessarily. Oh yeah. That's
Loving
why.
it, loving this.
Okay.
So you were right to make it aspirational.
Yes.
Apologies for my resistance. That was the right
Suggested
decision.
formulation.
Which is intended to be
Intended to
immutable.
be immutable. That's what you said. Yeah.
Well, the thing it retrieves is immutable, right?
Yeah. I mean, like an example would be like, okay, there's a paragraph of text and now one word is bold. So it's a different thing, but it still has the same information.
Yeah.
Can I just write this? Is that clear?
No, which is intended to be. I think it is aspirational. That's the point.
And the intent comes from the
Whoever defined the fragment.
Exactly, whoever defines a fragment, not the media source.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it might make sense to add this as a second sentence.
Yeah, fair.
Maybe like this.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds good to me too.
Good.
So now we can put the Google Felix Google example in does not match.
Exactly.
The third match of this Google search.
Okay.
How about the weather forecast?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
the
add it.
current.
But it depends. Like if it's like weather forecast about today, then like it changes. But if it's a weather forecast about a specific date, then it
The current weather forecast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
current weather forecast.
Good.
I would say another thing, like
This is also an interesting one. The edge
music
case.
playing on a radio station, something like that.
Say that again.
Like the music playing on a radio station.
Cool.
But that's actually not true. I would consider that a fragment. Because if you specify the radio station and you specify the time, then it's a fragment, no?
Yeah, like
No, but you didn't specify the time. It's right now. The music currently
Like-
playing on the.
yeah,
Currently.
that's the difference.
It's the indexicality of play currently.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
specify the time or not. Same with the weather forecast.
Yep.
So you could, to clarify this, you can in parentheses you could write without timestamp.
No clear time period.
Yeah. YouTube live videos are a good example of that too. They're not a fragment until it's over, and then it can become a fragment, right?
Let's consider the edge
Correct.
case again with this addition. A web URL we pretty much know can change over time, but at the same time,
We don't know that it does.
and
That's the
it
thing.
might be clear that maybe like a news article is not going to change that much, and it's a different type of edge case now.
Well, this is
Right.
intended. This was the point for intended to
Yeah.
be immutable.
Yeah.
If the page breaks or if the site goes down, I mean, what do you do?
Oops, we lost your sound suddenly, or I did.
Okay.
There you go. You're back.
I
mean-
said if the site goes down, it's the same case, right? If they change the site URLs, it's one thing. If the site goes down, it's another. But it's still intended to be mutable. It's just
Yes.
out of your control.
So I think we can keep it as an edge case. I just added not necessarily immutable as a.
Yeah. Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
this is why we had
I mean-
permalinks in blog days, right? But blog
Right.
permalinks were actually a brilliant case because the idea is the blog page is supposed to change all the time because here's the latest articles, but you had a permalink for each article. So you could have, here's the link of that article, which will never change.
How is that not? Okay, never mind. We don't need to go into technicalities here. Are we happy with this?
I am.
I mean, yes, I am. There's different, grades of attempt at being at permanence. Because that's a perfect example. The question is the third article down on this blog feed, this blog page.
Yeah, that's not permanent enough.
That's not permanent enough. But the third paragraph down on this news article
It's fine.
is. And then
if you have a perma
top.
link on the news article.
Right, but then they put at the top, edit, correction added, or something. Or they add a paragraph at the top. This is evolving. So it changed. That doesn't change, I guess. So did you know ahead of time this thing could change? And that's not.
That's covered by the intent. The intent for immutable.
I
think
think
so.
all of these will be interesting discussions how to formalize this, and the thing we discussed, like whether or not a system should even accept fragments that can guarantee immutability and how to go about that. I think we can pick it up at that point. For now, we just have this broad notion and we agree on what a fragment is, which is fine.
Okay.
So I'm going to drag that to consensus. Should I start creating a consensus entities and adjectives? Or yeah, it's fine.
Fine.
That takes us to standalone claim. Did we do this one? This is simply a rename. I'm going to leave it here for Carl. I unchecked Carl because only because we renamed it. But in essence, I mean, we still have consensus on this, right? Oh no, Felix, did we inform you on this? This is the old user story 1 claim.
What changed?
Nothing, the name and the aspirational tag. It was unused, so we renamed it and added aspirational, and then we can go into where it's being used right now.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I don't care about the word of the about the title. So if the definition stayed the same, I'm still good with that.
Yeah, that remains unchanged. We're already at the last one. Well, second to last. Usable claim. This is where we were trying to head to. So before, a usable claim was a system claim, not a system standalone claim, a system claim. Other than that, it's the same. It was an immutable system claim. It's gone?
I've taken system claim out and archived it.
So that's one thing we have to do. We decided to archive this one, and there's some consensus on that. But just for clarity of what happens, because we have agreement on the adjective, we no longer need the
system claim now.
Yeah, exactly. We can just say adjective and whatever is behind the adjective. And we had to replace claim with standalone claim, because that's what the goal here was.
What was the difference between standalone claim and contextual claim again?
Primarily indexicality,
okay,
among other things, also conciseness and some other.
And also a context. Right?
Yes. Yeah,
but like this, the whole like
within other context, within other contents.
The whole can be interpreted as a whole. Doesn't that contain the context?
It contains sufficient context, but for example, if it's a claim that's in the middle of a book, you have to include the whole book as the context or something, and a standalone claim
kind of excludes that because you don't want to.
Okay, yeah. I understand. Yeah. Okay, good.
So yeah, usable claim is essentially, I think, what we wanted to use here in user story 1. It is the thing that we've been trying to define all these meetings. I think overall we're pretty happy. There's one potential disagreement, and that's whether or not a usable claim
includes rejected claims.
Yeah, the current definition says it does. By mere definition, because system means candidate accepted or rejected. And a
Yeah.
usable claim with the current description says, and
Does not constrain further.
remember that the main reason for introducing this was because we agreed that a usable claim needs to be externally linkable, but there was disagreement on when this should be externally linkable. I originally said, for me, candidates aren't externally linkable. There was
And
some
I
disagreement
insisted
on
they
that.
should
Other
be,
people
yeah.
wanted that. So we just said, rather than trying to agree on whether or not candidate accepted or rejected should be externally linkable, we just say it should be externally linkable, and we can decide later when something becomes externally linkable.
Yeah.
Which is
And my what I'm saying is I would constrain usable to be non-rejected, and you shouldn't be able to link to a rejected claim. Of course, you can link to a candidate claim, which can become rejected. That means you have, it's still externally linkable once it's rejected, but it's not, you have a link to a non-usable claim at that point because it's been rejected.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. So I would add the rejected in the definition. And I agree, it's a change of definition.
I don't mind that either. My intent of usable is just even further that I wouldn't make candidates usable. Other than that, it's the same. But it means we cannot use system here. So we would have to say a candidate or accepted standalone claim.
We could keep system, it's not bad, but then further constrained by,
Yeah, but that's
non-rejected.
Yeah.
Which is.
But then what's the goal of using system here?
Because it's in system, there's also, it's being submitted to the system as of a certain type, yada, 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 which is.
But that's candidate.
Still relevant.
No, but that's candidate.
Okay, so we could say candidate or accepted and make
that's
that
what we're saying it is, right? And there's some disagreement, well, only me, that says that maybe candidates shouldn't be externally linkable either.
Right. What I would say is keep system, because that includes all three, but we can still add constraints, and then say not in rejected state, and maybe some systems will refuse candidates.
So what I'm hearing here is that usable, you're basically debating if usable relates to externally linkable or structurally linkable, right?
Not as such.
Kind of.
Because yeah.
It does.
Maybe. Okay, fair.
It does. It's just shorthand for whether or not something is externally linkable.
Yep.
A standalone claim and then yeah, that is actually the key here. Structurally linkable, I think, better, which is undefined. So I think if we want to continue this process today, we could try to define structurally linkable, which might resolve some of the yeah, I don't know what to do with this.
For me, okay. I still tend to not think of them as externally linkable, structurally linkable, because for me, a rejected claim
is not externally linkable, but by definition, it's correct. Just like for me, a candidate is not.
One second. Where do you have that the rejected claim is not externally linkable? Maybe it was.
We don't have that.
We don't have anything about rejection.
Exactly. That's a disagreement. So using this very open definition, we can now say in which systems are claims structurally linkable, and then we can say, well,
no, one second. You keep saying we don't have this, which means we don't have this. It's like you're not answering what I'm saying. I'm saying externally linkable does not mention the question of accepted, rejected candidate.
It doesn't.
Okay, we agree on that.
Yeah.
So when you say usable is about externally linkable, I think
structurally linkable.
Okay, and structurally linkable doesn't mention it either.
It's not defined. Structurally linkable, we haven't defined yet. But structurally linkable was what we decided to. We all agreed a usable claim needs to be structurally linkable, but we didn't agree on which claims are structurally linkable.
Right.
That's the whole point. So there's disagreement on whether or not candidates should be structurally linkable, whether or not rejected claims may be structurally linkable or not. I think there's actually agreement that we don't want rejected claims to be structurally linkable, but we by phrasing it as this, we simply postpone it, and you can decide in whatever system implementation when system standalone claim is structurally linkable or not. All we have to agree on is what structurally linkable means.
And the problem is, since I think a candidate can be structurally linkable, then that raises the issue that maybe something can become rejected afterwards, and then it's been structurally linked. Maybe it's not structurally linkable henceforth, but it's been, what do we mean by linkable? Linkable
exactly.
henceforth,
that's what I'm saying. The next step is defining what structured linkable means, and that's going to shed more light on what we're saying here.
Do we mean henceforth or at some point in time?
So for now, I think it's best to just keep it open.
For me, is like, to speak broadly, like internally, how do we call it internally? Yes, linkable.
Structurally linkable.
Structurally linkable is like anything. Oh wait, I forgot it. That can be referenced inside a system.
Basically, that it is like a foreign key reference.
Like an internal link, kind of. It doesn't have to be externally linkable, but still things can be connected.
Structurally linkable, I mean, in the more abstract sense, we meant like, you know, you can make foreign key references to it. Specifically for claims, we meant it can be used as the premise of an argument or as the conclusion of an argument.
Right.
So those are examples. We haven't defined that yet. That's essentially the intent we were going for.
Yes.
Yes. And for me, I would tend to be extremely inclusive about this. Like for me, I have no problem if it's has been structurally linkable at some point, and that would include rejected in my understanding of what I mean by structurally linkable. If you mean structurally linkable henceforth, that's a totally different, you know.
Right. I think I agree with you that you know, structurally linkable means it is possible, you know, yes, those links can exist. We can define use cases that say, you know,
we should revise them. Yeah.
Cannot be linked anymore, or structurally linked. Yeah.
No, but so it sounds that structurally linkable is new links can be added. This and
no,
the definition could be made clear by saying what?
No, that's what we're arguing on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for me. My implicit when I hear this, it's like a link can be made, can have been made. So it's not henceforth. You think henceforth. I don't.
Right. I agree with Marc-Antoine's interpretation that we should define it as has been made. Right.
Suggestions?
So something which can be referenced or has been referenced as part of other things.
Okay, let's check that. But that isn't this confusing? So we just okay with this definition of structurally linkable, the one I just rewrote, something which can be referenced or has been referenced as part of other things. So in a rejected,
the thing
rejected
is,
usable claim, you would still call it structurally linkable. Because let's suppose that a claim was a candidate, it got added as a support because it was structurally linkable, but then it got rejected, then it's still structurally linkable.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying the usable claim, I would add the non-rejected as an additional constraint. For me, that constraint does not come from the structurally linkable, from the linkable terms.
But then we don't need to define structurally linkable. Then there's no point, because I mean,
I don't think there's no point. It's the fact that we can have a link, an internal link to it. Now,
no, but we added structurally linkable to settle this debate. If you're saying we don't need it and you want to write something different here, then we don't need to say what.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm not sure that structurally linkable settles that debate after all, because I think it's something else. We want to say non-rejected, and it's something else.
I agree with Stephen's point here, because yeah, the debate is whether or not somebody can link a candidate claim, use a candidate claim in an argument. And if we are just saying, oh, it's a structural possibility, then it's, you know, we're not resolving the debate. We can say, yeah, sure, it's structurally linkable, but no, they can't use it as a link. And we've undone the debate that we had.
Exactly.
Okay. There was a use case, right? It's like, I have a candidate claim. I say this claim would, if accepted, would be a support. And I want to be able to write that in the system. This claim, if accepted, would be a support of that other claim, which is there, presumably. So that's a use case. And then that claim gets rejected. And that does mean it becomes, in my mind, non-usable. And that means the support link should be flagged as having become invalid, which is a different thing. But the fact that I want, as a use case, to be able to...
Let's add that because it's not there. As
Sure.
a
contributor.
because it's not number one, just to be clear.
That's fair. I want to add a candidate claim.
Standalone claim or claim?
Good question. It's a candidate, so we don't know yet.
No, what's the
Candidate claim.
What's the domain type? Candidate simply says that it's a candidate. What's the domain type? It's a candidate of it. The claim or a standalone claim?
Candidate claim.
So the less strict one. You're saying
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be non-indexical.
Yeah, in the
So it's being submitted for the reason of being a potential vloggable smudge blocker.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
In the interest of progressive formalization, yes. I want to add a candidate claim as a potential support supporting claim for a usable claim, I guess. So that if the candidate gets accepted, the support is already recorded, right?
But so you want to add claims as support.
Yeah. Or gets rephrased. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it's accepted and rephrased. Maybe I should make that into another use case. So you're right. Let's use candidate standalone claim here.
That makes more sense if it's a similar use case.
Yeah.
I want to add a candidate standalone claim. That's actually as a supporting claim potential. Doesn't matter, it's candidate already. I want to add a
true.
Supporting claim for a user claim so that it may get accepted essentially.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is I don't want to postpone adding it as a support until it gets accepted. That's really the key point here. Yeah. I don't want to have to remember, oh, someday it'll get accepted and then I'll add it as a support. That's ridiculous. I'm adding it as a support and I want it to be known that it's meant to be a support and that when it gets accepted.
Yeah, so this could be another way of going around it. Like we can then agree to not agree on wanting to support this use case, for example, and then we don't need the language structurally linkable indeed.
So a fine detail, I agree with Marc-Antoine said. I want, once I add it, I propose a new claim and I don't want to wait it to get accepted to connect it to support something. But that's an implementation detail actually, because I could also say I add the claim as a candidate and then I have this support change request, whatever. And then once the claim gets accepted, then the connection automatically will be added.
But the connection is already there when you, I mean,
The-
isn't that implied by as a supporting claim? Isn't that a connection?
It depends. It's an implementation detail, as I said.
I think there's an implementation detail in how, like, do we put the support link in candidate state or not? That's an implementation detail. But the use case intent is I don't want to have to wait for acceptance to create that link. And for me, that's not implementation detail. That's a use case.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yes, that's the user use case. I just said it doesn't have to be like in the background. It doesn't have to be linkable for that to fulfill the user story.
What? Okay. No, sorry, that's not obvious.
Oh no, like this. It may not be the same link. Like once the candidate gets accepted,
yes,
this proposal link becomes a real link.
I agree that the link may change nature at that moment. That is an implementation detail. Totally agreed. But I'm saying it has to be linkable for me to create a link, whether or not that is the final link.
Can I dig deeper? So first of all, I like this because rather than trying to define usable claim, we just define more user stories and can discuss them without having to define structurally linkable. But it does beg the question, what is a usable claim here? Because this is the thing that we're removing. So this is going to be a standalone claim, but which type? An accepted?
Let's say an accepted standalone.
And but only accepted, or would you also support adding candidates to candidates, which I think you want?
Yeah, probably true. Probably true.
And this is the part of the reason why I don't want that, is because then you start creating a lot of links that change once, because these are not immutable, right?
Correct.
So part of why I don't want to do it is because then these links change meaning if you change what you link to, and if these links, they can be reused in many different places because you can use a candidate in many other different. That's part of my motivation for not wanting to support this user story.
Enough.
But either way, I think this now highlights clearly indeed what we may disagree on wanting to support, which is good.
No, that I understand. Okay, and my point is good point about the mutability. It's a perfectly valid point, but for me, it's not a reason not to do it. In the sense, even I would like to keep the link, have the link flagged. Hey, by the way, since you established that link, the definition has moved, and do you want to compare, and do you want to update? And like, there should be a way to know that it's obsolete, but I totally want to have the link, because remembering that I meant this to go there, and then it goes through iterations, and then I have to, oh, by the way, I had meant this to be a support for that. My goodness, it's remembering that is a ridiculous memory pressure.
No, I get that. I get that. But yeah, we can talk about that later. Does that mean that we can eliminate usable claim entirely?
No. See,
what
think
benefit does it still have now?
It's, well, it's the henceforth, right? We said, I said for me, structurally linkable is not a henceforth thing, but usable claim is a henceforth thing in my understanding of usable claim. It means I should not be able to add a candidate to a rejected claim, for example. And that's what I mean by usable. Like in my user story too, I want to add a candidate standalone claim as a supporting claim for a rejected standalone claim? No.
So you're saying usable is a combination of candidate and accepted?
Yes, that's what I've been saying all along.
So that it should be an adjective, in other words.
Yes. And
that's where the disagreement lies on, because I want to not. So let me emphasize the difference now with this one and that one. So I would say as a web author, I wouldn't say as a contributor. As a web author, I want to link to an accepted claim in a claim repository, so that players can and that's again where we're moving the problem, because you say that you can add stuff to candidate,
candidate
claims,
claim, which is a
yeah,
different user story.
which is
I'm
why
happy
we
with that.
introduced usable. So it is in essence structurally linkable that we still need to define.
Okay. Okay, so what you're saying, if I understand well, is usable varies by implementation. You might define
Exactly.
usable as accepted, and I might define as accepted or candidate.
Exactly.
And
But what we agree on is this thing that you need to be able to add premises and whatever. That's what we're talking about. And the conditions under which that's possible, there's some disagreement on.
yeah.
And that's what we were trying to define with structurally linkable, and maybe a bad name, but that's the intent of this one.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that's your intent for this one, and it's not my intent for this one.
Yeah, but then let's create a new one. That doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
Just to highlight why it was introduced was because we don't have to agree under which conditions something is the intent of my one.
I agree.
Want to
I
name
agree.
it.
So I think I agree with your proposal of let's make usable an adjective.
Yeah, but what is it then?
It means
Maybe that's my structure linkable that I intended to add.
yeah, the henceforth structural, structurally linkable.
Usable. Okay, let's try to define this.
Something that has a system type, a system entity, I should say.
We haven't defined system entity anywhere. We only have domain types if you want to reuse the same terminology.
We have the main type. Okay, good. So let's use no. We have entity within the tags, but you're right. That's not good enough. Okay, a system entity, a system domain tag.
And by system you mean
Yes.
this?
Yes. I mean this.
Yes, I think that is correct. Yes, that is correct. It's actually interesting that the definition of system. That this is not a good definition. There's a slight misphrasing here. It's not phrased as an adjective. No.
I think it's fine. It's information. We're qualifying the information.
Something. Yeah, I think it's fine. The intent is.
It's an adjective for information. Yeah.
It's domain type, which to which the system will accept
linking.
Yeah, further external or structural links.
And two ways, being used in and being linked.
Yeah, you're right.
You said to which
the system will accept the formation of new structural or external links. A given system, we should say.
Yeah. Come again, sorry.
I'm not sure about like
formation. Yeah.
The formation of new structural or external links.
Like I'm not sure about accepting new external links. I don't understand the mechanism there, because I guess in the case of a rejected claim, what does it mean not accepting new external links? Does that mean people can't see it anymore? It's suddenly hidden, and that means
no,
it
I don't
breaks
think it's hidden. Yeah, you're right. Let's say structural instead of external. Fair enough. Good point, Tim. Structural is enough. The formation of new structural links.
Links, these can either be incoming or outgoing, or how will we say this?
It doesn't matter actually.
Doesn't matter now.
Let's say with which instead of to which. Using which, yeah, with which.
I think doesn't matter indeed. Structural link implies two-way. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
And
this was my
have-
intent
have-
with structurally linkable.
I mean, and this is not just links in the graph sense, but also like in the relational sense, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have a direction.
No,
That way.
yeah, I don't think. The question is whether this is not too broad. It might very well be that we'll consider some formations, but not other formations. But then we'll see it when we get there.
Right. It's I can see it being usable as. It's no longer usable as, right? And we might want to say it's no longer usable as a premise, but it's usable as a conclusion. And I'm not saying that's an actual example, but
that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Is that a thing?
Is that a thing? I'd love to see examples for that, because even though I understand it in the abstract sense, the question is whether we need this.
It's true that what links are we talking about? There's certainly the argumentation links are a case. What other links are there? Causal
Definition links, specialization links. This is a more specific claim of another. This term used in that claim is a definition, etc. You can imagine many.
Yeah, and the one that I think all of those I think usable works. The one that doesn't work, of course, is the contextual claim. Like this came from there, remains valid.
What do you mean?
When I'm saying this fragment comes from that source, is that a link? You could think of it as a link, and for me, this you could still say something is, for example, rejected as a claim, for example, but it still came from wherever, so it's still linked with source in some way.
But aren't you then just saying that all fragments are usable or something along those lines?
No, I'm saying I want to make it clear that okay, for me, usable being rejected means being non-usable in most semantic links. Structural links, but maybe there's a distinction I'm trying to introduce between semantic link and structural link. Certainly none of the links that interest us, except the link between text fragment and its source. That's the only link I'd still allow for a non-usable claim. It's the only link I can think of that I would refuse a non-usable, a rejected claim.
Wait. That's right. Can you
okay,
make
let me rephrase simply.
No, just make it concrete. I think I'm getting there, but let's like.
If I have a rejected claim, I don't want to
standalone claim.
Claim, rejected claim. It's not even a claim. By Viagra.
Yeah.
Okay. By Viagra is not a claim, so we agree.
What are you submitting it as? If you're submitting it as a claim by Viagra is not a claim, by the way.
Exactly, that's my point.
Okay.
It was a candidate claim, it got rejected.
Yeah.
Okay, so we agree, you and me agree that rejected means non-usable. So it would not be usable, it would be considered non-usable.
Not mean that we don't want to have rejected claims to be usable.
Yes.
That would be how you would implement it. We seem to agree on that, yes. Doesn't mean the same thing. It's still two separate concepts. And someone else may say, I want rejected claims to be usable.
Yeah. Someone else may say that, absolutely. But in a given system, we're saying, and in both our systems, we agree that rejected claims are not usable. So that would be an example of a non-usable claim. We agree on that. Both you and me. Maybe that's not part of the definition, but you and me agree that a rejected claim, like by Viagra, submitted as a claim, rejected as a claim, is non-usable. And I'm saying this non-usable claim might still be part of the contextual something because the fragment relationship. There's a relationship between a fragment and its source. This fragment came from that source. That's a link. And that's the only link I would allow still for a non-usable something, the link. The fragment link.
So you're saying as it was submitted as a candidate of the wrong domain type, then kind of?
For example,
Yeah.
it's then that's fine, because then we'll probably create a new entity with the correct domain type, and that is the one that will be linkable.
Because there's no, if there's no suitable domain type, how can you internally link to it?
Good point. If there's no, then it remains as rejected of whatever domain type, right? And it stays in the system as a rejected, for example, claim or standalone claim or rejected whatever, rejected entity definition. Doesn't matter. It's a rejected something. And as a rejected something, it could still be part of the, it was found here.
Yeah, but that
was my point. Like it could be part of this was found here.
new
Means
structure
like
links.
this has a domain type.
Yeah, but it was found here could be a new structural link. I'm saying new structural link with the exception of the fragment link, which is always allowed, even on rejected, even on non-usable is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, so if there's by Viagra that's rejected as a claim, you still want to say that there's a contextual claim that has a suggested rejected usable, well, not usable, standalone claim that is by Viagra. I don't see that as a valid use case, to be honest. I wouldn't want that, because if it's not a claim, why would you want to add it as a contextual claim? It would also
Well,
get as a contextual claim. If you ask
I would
me.
not want to add it as a contextual claim, but I would want to add it as a fragment saying, oh, by the way, this non-claim was also found here and was also found here. And look, a lot of people are making this invalid claim.
Yeah, but
and
again,
trying
then I'm
to use
saying,
it as a claim.
Okay, if you say that, sure, then we're talking about fragments, and then you're essentially implying that all fragments are usable. That's what I said before, which I don't necessarily disagree with.
That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's fine. All
That's
fragments are usable. That no disagreement there.
Okay, good. They're usable as fragments. Fair enough. And then it's rejected as a claim, but it remains as an active, as a usable fragment. Okay, I'm happy with that. Cool.
Well, it implies that a fragment is a fragment, and anything else that uses a fragment probably is a different domain type, and it may contain a fragment, etc. I think we'll get there if we define it better. I don't think we should hash too much on it. For now, it seems to work. That's the important bit.
Yeah.
That means I'm already gonna link to usable here, even though it's undefined. It's a new structure linkable. Then I'm a bit uncertain what you meant by this, but we can decide on that later. So a system standalone claim which is immutable, externally linkable, and usable.
I would have kept the structurally linkable. I don't think it's false.
I'm just not certain what it is now, because again, for me, this was what structurally linkable was.
Yeah, but we kept saying it has a foreign key, and we can put it in the.
Isn't that externally linkable?
No, externally linkable is the foreign keys exposed to the outside world. Structurally linkable means it has a foreign key in the dictionary. We can make a link with it.
Aren't all externally linkable things structurally linkable?
Yes, but the converse is not true. We can have something with a foreign key that we don't expose and that we don't allow people to make links of.
Sure, but is there any place where we are using structurally linkable right now that's not already covered by externally linkable?
That's a good point. Externally linkable implies structurally linkable. Granted.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wait,
So-
I'm not sure about that. How so?
What he's saying is,
Like,
you cannot be externally linkable without being structurally linkable, which I think is true. That means that externally,
without being external.
the reverse is not true. You can be structurally linkable and not externally linkable. I agree with that. But externally linkable does entail structurally linkable. I don't see
Yeah,
how to
I
make
think
an external
the
link
problem
if
is we
there's no
have
foreign key.
these adjectives are way too broad, and we are going to want to add the as a type thing again. You know, it's definitely, you know, internally linkable, structurally linkable as an argument or as a premise. You can, there's lots of things that can be, you know, maybe there are logs or things like that, or internal security structures that are structurally linkable, but you don't want to expose them to the outside world.
Yeah, but
so,
that's what the entity is, right? So I mean, again, if it's a fragment, if the as is relevant, it means that you can argue that a fragment is usable as a claim. I would say no, because it's the whole point of domain types. A fragment is a fragment.
But
There
that's a
might
good
be
point.
we might mull polymorphism in our domain types. And we have that actually. We have this. We have claims, which is a
And
superset of
we have entity definitions. That's a very good point. Like we can say something is an entity definition is not used as a premise, is not usable as a premise. It's still usable because it's usable as a valid entity definition wherever the link type allows entity definitions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, so usable in the absolute, not usable as, means is that usable wherever that domain type is allowed.
Yes.
So and maybe we should make that precision in usable to mean use.
Well, it is a system domain type. It is there.
Yeah, new structural links for that domain type, we could say.
Yes.
I think that covers what Tim is trying to say. And it makes the fragment thing even clearer.
Domain type instance? No.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Domain type instance.
An instance of a
system instance of a domain type. A system instance of a domain type.
Yeah, I think that resolves what I was. Yeah.
Yep, you're right. Thanks. I'm aligned at this point.
Oh, we don't have definitions yet. We can do that. And I think that's also a nice time to, and maybe whoever wants to can add some examples. I don't think we'll do that
I'll
now.
spend some time on this later today.
But I think that means.
Oh no, it cannot be proposed definition either until it has examples. Is that right?
Yeah. But by all means, maybe we should update that, because I have had a tendency of dragging stuff we're working on to propose the need to separate from the list. So I do find that a meaningful process, but it's against the written up process indeed. I think this is enough for today. We actually came a long way.
It's brilliant. No, I think I see two usable. I think the second one is empty. I'll remove it.
Where?
Just below the.
Oh, we must have added it before. Yeah.
And it's empty. Let's just delete this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And how is usable different from structural linkable?
We won't go into that discussion. The point is that we have now a definition that we have called usable, and that's what we use in usable claim.
Yeah.
That's really what is key here.
So we're just not using structural linkable right now.
Not
right?
yet.
Okay.
Not yet, because it's
surface
implied
later.
by externally linkable.
Exactly.
Maybe we should put that in the structurally linkable implies, and the externally linkable implies structurally linkable.
I wouldn't, because there's consensus here, and this seemingly is clear enough. We can do that once we.
Let me put it in the comments.
Yes. Yes.
To be honest, I think we've changed the perspective here, and we've gotten rid of the purpose of externally linkable. Because I think what we wanted to do with externally linkable, not externally, sorry, structurally linkable. What we want to do with structurally linkable is, again, you know, this claim can be connected to an argument or whatever. The usable as takes that place, where instead we want to say, you know, a rejected claim is not usable as a premise of an argument. It's not usable as. Well,
oh yeah, no, sorry, that would be, I mean, yes, using this terminology, you can say I don't want rejected claims to be usable as. Yes.
Right. And at that point, like, I don't know if there's any point of structurally linkable, because that's part of the definition of usable as a premise in an argument or something, is you're saying
So
you're linking it for that reason.
Marc-Antoine added it for a different reason, which I think I understand, but none of our current definitions need it. So I wouldn't add definitions for the sake of adding definitions. If we ever come to
No,
a
that's fine. I'm
disagreement
just
where we
saying
need
where
to
I
define
think
it,
this is
then we
going.
can.
It's just making me think about something though. Can we imagine something being usable and not externally linkable, but only structurally linkable? Can we imagine, is that a case we want to support?
Yes, I can see that happening. I can definitely see that happen.
Okay,
Giving the example of security elements,
then
right?
maybe what we
Yeah.
want in usable claim is structurally instead of externally linkable.
Then first, please define structural linkable, because you lost me there. Because something
It's-
which can be referenced. Also, remember when he tried to define it, we couldn't find anything that didn't match the definition, which I also thought was
Yeah.
probably
So maybe what we're talking about is internally linkable instead of structurally.
That's
linkable.
what. Yeah, that's it
sounds
is what I mean.
relevant, if that's what you mean.
Well,
Yeah.
for me, they're the same, but yes. For me, that's a synonym. I'm fine either
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. I'm just saying it's the naming would make more sense in relation to external.
Sure. If you're more comfortable with that name, I'm happy.
So what isn't internally linkable? Something that the system doesn't allow linking internally, or doesn't link internally?
External things that are external of the system, basically.
Yeah, actually, because indeed, remember that when we talked about these gears of a watch were even considered. So we didn't.
Yeah,
even...
we had something different in mind. I think
Exactly.
whole was
I think
like
we had more the
part of a whole thing, but that's probably not even what we want here.
The part of a whole was interesting, yes.
It was interesting, but it's probably not useful right now for user stories, I think, because we're actually talking about internal links between domain type.
I would argue for user stories, internally linkable is never going to be relevant, because something that is only internal by its very definition won't be external. It won't be part of a user story. So that's useful for talking about implementation details, but I don't see how this will ever be required terminology in the user story.
No,
something can appear in the user interface without a link to it.
Yep.
Isn't that then just not externally linkable?
Exactly what we're saying.
So it's a negation of externally linkable?
It's not a negation. It's
internally linkable.
It's internally linkable.
But is that even true? I mean, if you have a piece of text and a web page and you visualize it, is it even internally linkable, the second paragraph?
Okay, now let's take an example. Like, let's say users don't have public profiles on a website, right? But users can talk to each other in the website platform thing. That means like user is still part of a user story, and the user is linked to a message, for example, or a chat room, but you cannot have an external link to a specific user on the website.
That's a good example.
So you're talking about implementation details, right? Use this in a user story.
No, it's about user stories which are or are not allowed. There's no affordance for linking to a user, even though it's a system entity, it's internally linkable, but there's no way to make an external link. Here is the user. Here is the user profile. Here is all the posts of the user. There's no external link that
so your user
there.
story is a description of what is not supported.
Yes.
That first of all, it's not a user story, but if that would be the case, let's write it as a user story that is supported, and then you can say as a chat user, I want to have an external link to.
That was just like what I explained was just a counter argument of your claim, Stephen, that you say everything that's internally linkable is externally linkable.
That's
yes.
what everything that's externally linkable is internally linkable is what I
said.
Probably
that is true, but do you claim the other way?
It's the converse we're contradicting.
I didn't say the.
Okay, then it might.
We both heard it, but it's okay.
This will never be useful terminology in user stories, is what I was arguing for.
And we say yes.
Yeah, so I want to hear a user story that uses.
And that's what I just said. Like a user can have a profile on a website.
As a user, I want to have a profile on a website.
Yeah, and that's it.
No,
So where is
if that,
internally linkable used in this user story?
No, the thing is like the website doesn't have to provide external links to that profile.
Okay. Let's be clear on the purpose of the glossary. The purpose of the glossary is to be able to define user stories we share and understand what they mean. So if you don't need to use internally linkable in any user story you can come up with, the point is that we shouldn't be trying to.
Yeah, I'm not saying we have to add internally linkable for the sake of having the definition. I'm saying that because you made a claim.
Yeah, where I'm beginning to agree with Stephen is it's very hard to think of a system object and importance of system as opposed to aspirational objects that is not internally linkable. And that way, it may be a bit redundant. It would be a very weird implementation that would allow a system object to not be internally linkable. So it may be
I can agree there, right? Like that every part of the system is internally linkable and therefore we don't need a definition. Fine. But not everything of a system is externally linkable.
There we agree. There I'm absolutely with Felix. And that way, maybe we should just remove the externally linkable constraint on usable claims. Because I think what we're saying is there's no
user story for that.
Or there could be a user story, but it's not an obligatory user story.
Okay, let me remember here. First of all, I think externally linkable is primarily something that was introduced by you, Merkant.
That's correct.
But because let's see how I feel about removing external linkable system standalone claim, which is, yeah, I agree. I don't mind. I mean, yes, I mean, it is external linkable in the sense that if you have a website, you're going to have to link from that website to the claim in the system.
What I'm saying is that a usable claim may be at the system's discretion externally linkable.
But how are you going to support this?
In this user story, and in this user story, that means it's an additional constraint. It's you want to link to an externally linkable usable claim.
Okay, Stephen has a point here because it's user story 1.
It's fair.
Yeah,
it's fair.
Yeah, and write me a user story using a not externally linkable usable claim. I don't think it's going to be a user story. It's going to probably be like a description of an implementation or something like that.
It could be a user story where.
Let's try just as a
contributor. I want to link a usable claim in the system to another usable claim in the system as support.
Okay, and a usable claim you say is not externally linkable, right?
May not be, yeah.
So how do you link something that's not?
Because that's an internal link, we're fine.
So this contributor is a what? System admin or something?
It's a contributor logged in on the system as a contributor on the system. I don't have to be admin. I can be a contributor. But as a contributor on a given system.
I hope we find the problem we're talking about.
I think it's more about what is the boundary of the system than anything else, I think. And it's also, again, what is, we talked about this something which can be retrieved from outside the system using a locator. We had many discussions here on like, yeah, what is the boundary of the system? And now you're defining something as internal because somehow the contributor has access to the system and is in the system or something like that.
Yeah, I'm saying he's a system user. He's using the system, and he has credentials.
And there's no link
Why
to
isn't
the
someone
outside.
using an API a system user? What's the difference here?
You could be using an API. I don't care. What I'm saying is that the only constraint here is that the link can be made within the system. It does not mean that the link can be made outside the system.
It could be an offline system.
Yeah, okay, I think I know what you mean. By within the system, you mean that it's essentially stored in the database of what the scope of what you would consider a system, as in that link is not something that, yeah, okay. Let's see then back to the
It may be
user
visible in the
story.
UX, but there's no URL for it.
That's exactly the point, yeah.
And then the user story here is.
But is a fragment considered a link? Because it could be a link. It's got a reference.
It can be one, but I don't think it's a link.
Not intrinsically. Though as I said, there is an intrinsic link in the fragment, which is linking the fragment to its source. But that's
what is
I don't think that's
that
what
here?
you mean.
We have to distinguish between link in a general sense and hyperlink.
Yeah. Maybe we'll want to define semantic links shortly, but let's not go there.
Next time.
Yeah, next time.
Okay, I'm actually totally fine with removing external linkable. I honestly, it doesn't matter. It's not the crux of this thing. I mean, by the very definition of this user story, it will be external linkable. I want to link to.
Yeah.
I don't think it adds much.
Yeah, let's see in the future if we have user stories where this is important.
We have a does not match definition, a paragraph on a past version of a web page which was not archived, not externally linkable. That's how we used it.
Because there's the fragment implied, basically, right?
Yeah. And the fragment was not stored and blah, blah, blah.
So usable claim, first of all, has nothing to do with fragment right now.
Correct.
It doesn't.
So the example is wrong. It does not match.
Will
it does not match.
Does not match.
Does not
match.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah, good.
It's fine.
I'm fine either way, keeping it. I just don't see the point of trying to disambiguate between external and internal. I think I get it, but I still don't really understand the user story aspect.
The reality, Stephen, you know why it doesn't matter? Because we are saying usable, and usable is per system, and you might decide in your system that everything usable has to be externally linkable.
I think so, yeah. I mean, given that the nature of what CDL tries to be, I think that's somewhat implied.
Yep. And I'm happy. And by the way, given the nature of what hyperknowledge tries to do, it's also true.
Yeah.
I want everything to be externally linkable.
So we don't have to define things we agree on. We could even go as far as to say that usable means externally linkable. If we agree on that.
You know what? Maybe, yeah. Or you know, in the systems under consideration, I would just add that proviso. In the systems under consideration, usable requires externally linkable, has to include accepted, and so far does not include rejected, and some system do or do not include. I would add that in the text of usable, because I think it gives an idea of what we're talking about. Can I?
Not in the definition. The point of the
fair
definition is that, I mean, sure, you can add it in comments, but I don't see how that's pertinent to the definition.
It's okay. This is interesting.
It's not defined by, the point is to define it and you use it in the ongoing considered systems.
For me, suggestions can be part of the definition. Like, it's more than an example, but okay, let me put it in an example. We said we would do that anyway. Systems under consideration agree that all accepted
Standalone claims.
instances are, yeah, sure, accepted standalone claims are usable. Systems.
I mean, I think it would become relevant to move external linkable to usable, because we're also gonna need usable contextual claims probably, and usable fragments, etc. And yeah, fragments need to be externally linkable, I guess. So it might shorten our definitions if we move external linkable into usable. Or we can just repeat ourselves each time, or not make it explicit. I'm honestly fine either way here.
Yeah, let's decide it next time.
It's not a source of disagreement, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah. So if we don't disagree, there's no point in defining it.
Yeah.
I'll do more, but this is, I'm beginning to, let me get externally linkable as a took.
Yeah, I do like this. It's maybe not what we usually do with matches definition, but it works. It makes it clear.
Okay.
And I would potentially still suggest to add external linkable to usable, but we don't have to. We can refactor that later. Refactoring definitions.
Yeah. Yeah. No objection.
So, do we think this is enough to?
Yeah, I think so. I added it already.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so I think this is, and yeah, then at this point in time,
we can move on to contextual claim next meeting.
yay!
Maybe.
Yeah, then someone who comes in is like, what is all this? No, we have fragment defined, so I think we can pick up. We have usable claim defined, so I think we can start aiming again to defining.
Yeah, we should try, even though we have little questions or whatever, we should try to push through, so have like a broader scope.
Oh, we will have questions, trust me.
But
we'll spend a whole meeting
by the way,
resolving them.
I've decided to postpone tomorrow's hyper knowledge seminar to next week. I'm not ready, so that means we can continue that conversation on contextual claims tomorrow.
I might not be able to take part in that. Did I say I couldn't join on Friday? No, I can't. So
okay.
Oh wait, 5. No, it's 4 to 5. I could do the first half hour, I think.
Okay, fair enough. So, progress.
Yeah,
Definitely progress. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you next
everyone.
time.
See you.
See you.